Good morning. Welcome to the Maryland Public Service Commission's administrative meeting for December 16th, 2020. Before we begin today, I'd like to recognize the passing of a longtime civil servant and employee at the Public Service Commission. Robert McGowan worked for the PSC for over 34 years in his various capacities, including serving as one of our public utility law judges. I did not have the opportunity or fortune to ever meet Judge McGowan, but many of the staff and commissioners at the commission remember him fondly. Some of my colleagues have some thoughts on his passing. Good morning, Commissioner Linton.
Good morning, and good morning to everyone in attendance today. And I thank you for the opportunity to say a few words about passing of Judge McGowan. I had the opportunity to first meet him as a brand new attorney working at BGE over 20 years ago. I met him because I knew him at that time as Your Honor, and he presided over several cases that I was able to lead with BGE at the time. I also got a chance to appear before him as in staff counsel, and he was always very affable. As I said earlier to my colleagues, tough but fair. And off the bench, he was one of the nicest people you'd ever want to talk to. Very quiet, but at the same time, keenly aware of everything around him and a very understated sense of humor. So my condolences to his wonderful wife, Lydia. Many of you know her. I don't even think I need to describe Lydia. She's been a great friend for many, many years and still remains one. And is, in my opinion, one of the best dancers you'll ever meet. So rest in peace to Bob. The utility industry has lost a very good person. I know he's influenced many attorneys and many people in the industry. So God bless. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a whole lot to add other than to express our condolences to the McGowan family and Bob and Lydia's extended families on behalf of all of us. And to add a little bit of the human side, not just the professional side. Lydia and Bob met at the commission and had a wonderful life before their retirement. Lydia retired, if memory serves me correctly, just a little bit before Bob did. And when I had come to the commission, I was unpacking all my stuff from moving into my office, and there was a lot of bubble wrap associated with it. And Lydia needed that bubble wrap, but after she retired, she lost her source directly from me because she wasn't around so much. But Bob dutifully would come down to the 16th floor and pick up that bubble wrap for me and take it home to Lydia. And I know they were deeply in love, and we respect his service so much, and we miss Lydia, and we wanted to express our condolences. So that's all I have, Mr. Chairman, but our heart goes out to the families.
Thank you, Commissioner. Turning to the administrative meeting, we have minutes to approve from last week's meeting of December 9th, 2020. The vote on those minutes begins with Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton.
Was not in attendance, so I will abstain.
Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Aye.
I vote aye. The minutes are approved. Good morning, Mr. Secretary.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. There are 5 items on today's consent agenda. Item number 1 is the notice of cancellation of bond from Atlantic Bounding Company, Inc. for API Link LLC. Item number 2 is another notice of cancellation of bond from NGM Insurance Company for Enercom, Inc. Item number 3 is a request from Blooming Grove Wind Energy Center, LLC for certification of the Blooming Grove Wind Energy Center as a renewable energy facility. Item number 4 is a request for certification from Hardin Wind, LLC and RWE Renewable Services, LLC for certification of the Scioto Ridge Wind Farm as a renewable energy facility. And finally, item number 5 is a notification from Green River Renewables, LLC of its new ownership of the Columbia Mills hydropower Moomaws Dam project.
Thank you. Seeing no questions from the commissioners, with respect to items number 1 and 2, I move that we cancel the company's energy supply license. With respect to items number 3 and 4, I move that we approve the application and issue a renewable energy facility ID certification number, direct the applicant to establish a REC account with PJM GATS within 30 days of certification, and direct the applicant to notify the commission within 30 days if the information on which the application is based should change. And with respect to item number 5, I move that we note the filing. The vote begins with Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton,
Aye.
Commissioner O'Donnell,
Aye.
and Commissioner Ridge.
Aye.
I vote aye. The motions on the consent agenda are approved.
Mr. Chairman, the administrative agenda includes revised tariff pages to conform to the Commission's revised community solar regulations under COMAR 2062 in items 6 through 8 from Potomac Edison Company, Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, and Delmarva Power and Light Company and Potomac Electric Power Company. On these items, which will be handled collectively, we have for staff, David Hoppick, Drew McAuliffe, and Annette Garofalo. For Office of People's Counsel, Jacob Oslander. For the Coalition for Community Solar Access, David Bielgemans, Salar Naini, Jake Springer, Leslie Elder, and Franny Uhas. And then for Potomac Edison specifically, Teresa Harold, Sean Rollman, and Ray Valdez. For BGE, John Frayne, Steve Bartenfelter, and Daniel Herson. And for PHI, Matthew Seegers and Albert Fan.
Thank you. We'll begin with the collective presentation by staff. Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman and Commissioners. David Hoppick on behalf of staff. The Potomac Edison Company, Baltimore Gas and Electric Company, Potomac Electric Power Company, and Delmarva Power and Light Company have filed revisions to the portions of their tariffs regarding the Community Solar Pilot Program to conform to the changes to COMAR 2062 made in Rulemaking 56, remove obsolete tariff language, and other housekeeping edits. Staff recommends that the Commission accept the tariff revisions as filed for each submitting utility with an effective date of January 1st, 2021. The proposed language will permit each utility to begin accepting projects using capacity for year 4 of the program on the effective date of the tariff. The proposed language has been discussed with members of the Net Metering Working Group. Aside from the comments filed by the Coalition for Community Solar Access, or CCSA, the working group has not expressed concerns with the tariffs. Regarding the proposed tariff revisions proposed by CCSA, staff does not recommend establishment of fixed start dates in the tariffs or a requirement for combining capacity from years 4 and 5. CCSA alleges that the utilities are responsible for a delay in the start of the program and should have begun according to the schedule listed in CCSA's comments. Staff disagrees with CCSA's assertion. Each participating utility filed an implementation plan in accordance with COMAR on September 1st, 2016. The Commission considered those plans and tariffs at the January 11th, 2017 administrative meeting and subsequently approved the program design in a letter order dated February 15th, 2017. The initial opening of the year 1 capacity and subsequent years opening was conducted by the utilities in accordance with the accepted tariffs, which did not dictate the start of each program year subsequent to the opening of the pilot. The Net Metering Working Group planned the schedule for the pilot with the participating utilities assisting as active and helpful stakeholders. As noted in staff's comments, the net metering working group spent significant time devising a system that allowed flexible, non-uniform starting dates to be used by each utility. Staff further notes that with the recent changes from Rulemaking 56, applicants now have twice as long to complete a project and can now enter a queue in 2020 that would carry over into 2021. Collapsing year 4 into year 5 is inconsistent with the created queue process and the schedule described in COMAR 20620202. The shift forward in capacity could cause excessive interconnection requests in a compressed time frame and may not be plausible for staff or the utilities to meet in all cases. Furthermore, the request of CCSA to accelerate capacity awards from year 5 into year 4 is not permitted or necessary because the existing rules require an annual award of capacity, with the exception of the low moderate income projects if capacity is reached in that category. COMAR places the discretion to award additional years capacity with the utility in order to manage the utility's workload. It is staff's understanding that the utilities prefer flexibility to manage the pilot program years in a manner that allows efficient use of resources and tracking of project information. Staff is available for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Hoppick. We'll now hear from the Coalition for Community Solar Access.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. David Beaglemans on behalf of the Coalition for Community Solar Access. I'm also joined today by Leslie Elder, the Mid-Atlantic Director for CCSA, Solar Naini from Turning Point Energy, and Jake Springer from Nexamp. CCSA filed comments on all 3 tariff filings on the agenda today. At year 4 of the community solar program, we find ourselves about a year behind schedule. CCSA's proposal to add start dates for years 5, 6, and 7 will get the program back on track and provide important certainty to developers. The Commission's regulations provide the program started on January 18, 2017, 6 months after the COMAR effective date of July 17, 2016, and will continue for a period of 7 years. This is contained in COMAR 20.62.02.01a and is independent of any implementation report filed by any of the utilities at the beginning of the program. With January 18, 2017 as the required start of year 1, we should have seen each program year start on January 18 through each subsequent year. For instance, year 3 should have started on January 18, 2019, and year 4 should have started January 18, 2020. The effective dates of the tariffs under consideration today would put the start of year 4 in December 2020 or later, almost a year after when year 4 should have started. The tariffs also contain no dates by which years 5, 6, and 7 must begin. We're at this point because the utilities have started each program year at a later and later date from the original January 18th yearly trigger. The table on page 2 of CCSA's filing shows the sliding nature of the program start dates for years 1 through 3. Year 1 opened in June 2017 for the 4 utilities, year 2 in October and November 2018, and year 3 in February 2020. We now find ourselves a year behind where we should have been. For example, for PEPCO, year 2 did not start until 490 days after year 1, and for year 3 did not start until 462 days after year 2. To get the program back on schedule, CCSA has proposed adding clearly defined start dates for years 5, 6, and 7, all set on when those years should have started based on the original January 18th, 2017 program start. Year 5 would start on January 18th, 2021, year 6 on January 18th, 2022, and year 7 on January 18th, 2023. Further, because we are about a year behind, we recommend rolling year 4 capacity into year 5, as year 4 will begin immediately prior to year 5 under our proposed language. As we'll discuss in more detail today, the inconsistent start dates for each program year have made developing projects in Maryland difficult. Developers have had to guess when the program years will start, which is challenging as they need to make investment decisions. This is an independent issue from the fact that we are behind schedule on the program, and it's something the Commission could address independently of that issue by selecting fixed dates for the remaining program years. Further, the delayed status of the program as it exists today may impact preparation of the Commission's report to the General Assembly, which should impact future legislative action on a permanent program. Ultimately, CCSA is simply requesting that the Commission modify the utilities tariffs to comply with COMAR 20.62.02.01a. Per these regulations, the program began on January 18, 2017 and will run for 7 years. A year is a year, and so each subsequent program year should start on that date through the remainder of the program. I'm now going to give the stage to Leslie Elder, who will discuss the practical implications of the early start date issue, and then Solar Naini and Jake Springer will follow up with a response to staff.
Thank you, David, and thank you, commissioners. My name is Leslie Elder. I'm the Mid-Atlantic Director for the Coalition for Community Solar Access, or CCSA. As many of you know, we are a trade association representing community solar industry leaders, nonprofits, and stakeholders who work to provide community solar to all consumers who choose to subscribe. Thank you for your time, and I'm so sorry for your loss. I will keep my comments very brief. So many of our members, both who currently work in Maryland and those who are planning to enter the market, have really requested program certainty. Understanding when the program years will start is imperative to business planning process. And this is really no different than any other business sector. The Maryland program to date has not provided the certainty to the marketplace and has made it very difficult for developers to plan community solar projects. In addition, I would like to clarify some comments that the staff have made for the record. The working group did indeed discuss program start dates during several working group calls. In fact, these discussions were memorialized in 2020 program improvement trackers that was emailed to the working group members prior to the working group calls to ensure that these issues were discussed. This was circulated by Mr. Vanderheyden via email on 602 and 522. CCSA has made this recommendation to modify the tariffs after Mr. Vanderheyden suggested this modification would be most appropriate in the tariff instead of the regulations to the working group. This is the reason CCSA has now filed our comments under the tariff proceedings. I will now turn it over to Solar Naini of Turning Point and then Jake Springer to go through the deeper components of this request. Thank you for your time, commissioners, and allowing CCSA and our members to speak on these important issues.
Chairman Stanek, commissioners, good morning. For those that don't know me, my name is Solar Naini, and I am the Vice President of Business Development with Turning Point Energy. We are a clean tech development company focused on utility and community solar applications across the country. Turning Point Energy has been participating in the Maryland community solar market since its inception in 2016. And by the end of next year, we'll have over 18 megawatts of community solar operating across the state. As the business development head for a small business, our team gets together once a year and I present recommendations on which markets to invest in. The biggest challenge I have with Maryland is convincing my team to continue our investment in the market, even though we don't have regulatory clarity on when projects will actually come to fruition. As a small business looking to invest during a pandemic, we need all the certainty we can get. We commission to at the very least memorialize program start dates in the utility tariffs so that small businesses like mine can continue to keep the Maryland economy going. In addition, I would like to directly address the raised by staff in their comments, which was the basis of staff's opposition to the proposed modification to the CSEG's tariffs. First, I would like to address staff's concern that, quote, firm dates would act to the detriment of the utility, which would be required to perform an unexpected and in some respects an excessive number of interconnections. I believe the inference here is that adding program year start dates would somehow create a pent-up demand for applying into the interconnection queue. I think it's important to not conflate the timing of interconnection applications with the timing of CSEG's applications. Neither the CSEG's tariff or the interconnection tariff have any restrictions on when interconnection applications may actually be submitted. In practice, developers such as Turning Point will identify sites. Once they are qualified internally, you register the projects with the PSC. Then we apply into the interconnection queue as projects have been placed on the PSC approved list. In essence, applying for interconnection is done on a rolling basis as projects are ready. Therefore, the concern raised by staff about the utilities processing an excessive amount of interconnections is not accurate when you introduce defined program year start dates. The second concern staff raised regarding its opposition with adding annual program start dates was that they could not meet a mid-January program opening. However, staff did not raise any specific reasons they could not meet this date in their comments. Based on our understanding of the program qualification process, we can surmise that staff's concern would be centered around the notion that having a date certain would create a bottleneck of project registration applications at the PSC. Very similar to the interconnection process, in practice, developers register projects with the PSC on a rolling basis as projects are qualified. Once projects are on the PSC approved list, as mentioned, we then submit them into the interconnection queue. In short, the interconnection and PSC registration applications are done on a rolling basis in Maryland, and adding program start dates to the tariffs would not create any sort of unnecessary burden on the utility. In fact, adding program start dates to the tariff would reduce the administrative burden for both the PSC and the utilities. Cementing program start dates will remove the administrative burden associated with having to come back to the commission and refile modifications to the existing tariffs on an annual basis. In addition, it allows both companies already participating in the market or companies planning to enter the market the certainty to make investment commitments by sending a clear market signal as to when program capacity will become available. I thank you for your time today. I'm available should any questions come up on anything I just talked about. Thank you.
Thank you, Salar, and thank you, Chairman Stanek and Commissioners. My name is Jake Springer. I'm a Senior Policy Associate with Nexamp, and I appreciate the opportunity to speak as well today. We are an active member of the industry in Maryland as well. We develop, own, and operate community solar projects across the state. Been in front of the Commission before, and happy to be back here today. So first and foremost, I think I'd just like to echo what has been said before me. And just to put it succinctly here, I think at the end of the day, the problem is that we have a 7-year pilot program, but there are currently no defined dates for when each program year starts, or even how long each year is supposed to last. So in practice, when do these program years stop and start? Well, it's determined by each individual utility on their own schedule. And in practice, as David and Salar, Leslie have pointed out, this means that program years are in fact longer than 12 months, have different opening dates. And while we receive notice of those, we have no long-term planning insight into when those years are going to start or how long they're going to last. As others have mentioned, industry has identified this issue for some time, and that this change will be beneficial within the working group. And from our perspective, this is really a simple issue. It's one of clarity and of program management, and not just clarity for industry, but about the overall length of the pilot program, which now would be longer than 7 years based on the current trajectory. I understand the staff has raised concerns about this proposal. I know Salar has sort of responded to some of those, but I will just reiterate that they do not correspond to how we understand how the program works and how the projects actually do apply into the program. Moreover, these concerns have not been raised in the net metering working group directly, so we have not had an opportunity to respond to them until today. What this is really is an addition to the program that will provide clarity on a basic issue. What it means for us as a business, Salar got into a bit, but really what it is the program dates in practice represent clarity for when we will be able to have a go or no-go decision on our projects in terms of when they will receive capacity under the program. If we have a project on a wait list, it means we are essentially sitting on a ready-to-go project waiting for a program year to open. If we are in the early development stage in a project, these are the dates that we plan around to ensure that our projects are in a position to have a go or no-go decision made on them by a certain date. As Nexamp, as a company, as we make a work plan for a given year or beyond, we need to coordinate the logistics for our various teams, our construction crews, to be sure that we are able to appropriately schedule our activity, both within Maryland and the projects that we're actively managing in Maryland, but our other markets as well. If we can't do that, it means delays. And as things stand today, I can't tell my teams in advance when we will know if we have a green light for our projects. So, I can certainly understand that the commission would prefer to take up this type of issue as a consensus item. But I will say, to the extent that there are concerns, either operational from the utilities or from the staff, I am personally frustrated that these were not raised in the context of the working group, and that we are responding to them today as opposed to within the working group. But in conclusion, from our knowledge of the program, we feel this is a common sense clarification that does not pose an unreasonable burden on staff or the utilities, but would actually provide a significant benefit to those of us in the marketplace. And I hope the commission will adopt the proposal into the respective tariffs. And I'm also available for any questions that the commissioners have.
Thank you. I am surprised to hear that this issue was not first addressed in the working group, so I'll have some questions in a few minutes regarding that. We'll now turn to the utilities, beginning with any comments from Potomac Edison.
Good morning, Commissioners. Teresa Harold on behalf of the Potomac Edison Company. Regarding CCSA's proposal, we historically have not included dates for the program year. It's in our tariff. That has been because we've been working collaboratively with the working group over time to determine when those start dates should occur. We've also appreciated the flexibility of not including the program year start dates in our tariff pages because the program rules have changed over time. So that flexibility has been important to us. But we do hear CCSA's concerns. To the extent the commission were to require us to add the program year start dates moving forward into our tariff, I don't think we'd have any major objection. The only downside we really see is, to the extent the program were to change moving forward, additional regulations, new rules related to the program that would impact future program year start dates, it would simply mean we would need to come in more often to request additional modifications to our tariff pages. So that's really the only downside we see. I can answer any other questions you have regarding our tariff pages. I also have with me Sean Rollman, who coordinates our pilot program for Potomac Edison, and Ray Valdez, who's our Director of Rates and Regulatory Affairs. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Harold. We'll now hear from Baltimore Gas and Electric.
Morning, Mr. Chairman. Daniel Herson for BGE. I also have Steve Barton-Felder, who manages our community solar program, here this morning with us, and John Frayne, our Director of Regulatory Strategy and Revenue Policy. I will simply echo Ms. Harold's remarks. I believe we agree with those 100%. I was a little dismayed to read the CCSA comments and the implication that somehow the utilities have been dragging their feet on starting the new program years. That's in our view simply not the case. Year one, that got started late because there were not final regulations put in place at the time. Year two started a bit late due to an unclear application of the year two regulations, and then year three started late because there were changes pending to the regulations due to the legislative changes expanding, for instance, the years of the program from 3 to 7. So, we have always tried to work collaboratively within the working group process. The cadence of those meetings has been a little irregular over time, but we've always tried to work diligently with the stakeholders to do things in a timely manner. So, we'll live with whatever the commission wants to do with this, and it will not be a burden on the utilities to have those years in the tariffs. But I do think Ms. Harold's correct in that it reduces the flexibility a bit in case other changes come up. For us, the most important thing is to have the program rules in any given year in place before we actually start the program year at the utility. So we're happy to answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Herson. We'll now hear from the PHI Utilities.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Matthew and Commissioners. Matthew Seegers appearing for PEP.
Mr. Seegers, we need you to turn off your video, please.
Is that better, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, I think you need to invest in or upgrade in your capacity, but it seems to be a continuing issue with your feed, so perhaps just audio is best for you.
Apologies, Your Honor. I would echo what Mr. Herson and Ms. Harold had said. The same applies for the PHI tariff sheets. The only thing I would say, would add, is that we have communicated to parties that even though there are no hard dates in our tariff, we will endeavor to open each year on the anniversary date. That being said, if the commission determines that that hard dates are in fact needed in our tariff, we would not have an objection to that. And I do have one minor wordsmithing edit, which we could take up at a later time if you'd like, Your Honor, to the PHI tariffs.
Well, it'd probably be best if we cleaned it up at the appropriate time after this discussion. So if you could have that ready, if it's relatively surgical, and we could review that. Are there any parties that I didn't recognize that wish to present comments to the commission? Okay, let me return to that point that Mr. Springer raised, and maybe Mr. Bielgemans, I'll have you field it first. I'm surprised that this issue hasn't been addressed before the working group prior to bringing it before the commission. Can you explain why it was not addressed?
Sure, I can take a stab at it, and then I think I'll pass the mic to Leslie Elder, who deals with the work group on a more regular basis. My understanding is there was an attempt made by CCSA to raise these edits with the work group, but due to the timing of when the meetings occur, it wasn't possible to have a productive dialogue then filtered into what was filed. So I think it was kind of a logistical timing issue with the way the work group was structured. But I'll pass it over to Leslie or I'll see Solar there. So do you want to?
Apologies. I just did want to clarify one thing. The issue was raised. The concerns that staff outlined in their comments regarding the issue itself were not raised during the working calls. So just wanted to provide that clarity. So the issue around the excessive number of interconnections and staff's inability to meet those January timeframes, those two concerns were not raised.
My question is, why not?
I can't speak on behalf of staff, Your Honor. Sure.
Your Honor, Annette Garofalo on behalf of Commission staff. I attend those work group meetings. I do not remember this issue ever being raised. I was surprised to see Mr. Bugelman's comments. The main purpose of our objection is not staff's workload, although I will point out that the first year of the program, we devoted an entire division just to making sure that everybody got their applications processed. I'm not sure we can do that every year, which is effectively what's being asked here. We also, despite what's been said, we can't necessarily process these applications in advance. First of all, we can't process them before we get them. And second, we can't process them once prior to the award of capacity. So it's not quite as clear cut as CCSA has made it out to be. And I think your question was, why hadn't it been brought up in the work group? And my answer is, I'm not certain that it had been. And if it had been, certainly our main opposition would not have been the timing, although we stick by our comments.
Hold on. So we hear that staff has been surprised by CCSA's comments. Both sides are telling me that, at least we've confirmed that this issue hadn't been properly ventilated before the work group, before bringing it to the commission in this proceeding. So I'm concerned about that. I'm actually very troubled about that. Mr. Bielgeman's staff and Mr. Hoppeck's presentation and his buck sheet effectively is invoking the doctrine of latches here. This has been an issue that parties have been aware of for a number of years. Why is this issue being raised with the commission at this time?
Sure. I think that's a fair question, Your Honor. First off, this issue has been raised with the work group, and Leslie and Solar can provide further details on that. I'm just not directly involved with that work. With respect to the idea that this is somehow late or inappropriate timing, this is the tariff filing that's implementing utilities tariffs for the remainder of the program. CCSA has been told that repeatedly by staff, my understanding is that issues with respect to dates are best dealt with through the tariff process. And while we've there's rulemakings that have been ongoing and there's been opportunities to make changes to the program, this date issue we believe is best addressed in the utilities tariffs. So that's why we're before you today on this issue. But again, this has been raised with the work group, and unfortunately, the timing usually is, we see one of the utilities tariffs, there's a short opportunity to comment, and then the filings are made. And it's really a logistical issue within the work group, but we have attempted to raise this with stakeholders, but before we came before the commission today.
Thank you, Mr. Buglemans. I'll turn to my colleagues if they have questions. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me start with Mr. Buglemans. Mr. Buglemans, today it looks like Central Maryland's getting its first dose of winter weather. And we've talked a lot about winter weather over the last few years, haven't we?
We have, yes, sir.
Are there any more delays for any of your clients that are participated in their regulatory requirements on completion dates or start dates, or any other delays in the queue that your clients have coming at us, like the seemingly endless stream we've had over the last several years?
I understand your point, Your Honor, and the commission, as you know, extended the deadlines for operation, basically doubling those. So that's really addressed that issue. I do want to clarify one thing, which I think is also conflated a bit in staff's buck sheet, which is the difference of the operational deadlines under the program and what these program year start dates would do. What we're talking about with these program year start dates is when capacity becomes available so projects can get into the actual queue. And as the presenters today indicated, that's once you get into the queue, that's when you can begin development. So these are different issues.
Well, they're interrelated issues. And the reason they're interrelated, with all due respect, is because the capacity can be gobbled up before the project is ripe. And I think there was a lot of that going on in the first couple of years of the program. I suspect that. Also before financing was completely lined up, even though winter weather, construction delays due to winter weather sure took a whipping over the last few years. So I just have a lot of concern about the seeming inconsistency of continuously asking for programmatic delays, and we even gave relief by extending to 2 years from 1 year the construction, the operational period. I just find it rich that on one hand it's an endless stream of delays on the developer's behalf, but now we're here talking about holding the feet to the fire tariff revisions for the utilities, and I just. And it puts a burden on the utilities, maybe, or staff, as a minimum, should be fully vetted before the working group, before we try to make a decision on this here. What do you say to that?
Well, I can tell you, that the extension of the operational deadlines by basically doubling them has made a difference for projects that are under development. But again, what we're talking about at this point is when capacity will become available for projects to enter a program year. So it's really a go, no-go decision at that point. In terms of developers being able to plan and actually begin permitting and then actually get to the point where there can be delays, honestly, this is like the threshold step. And what we're asking for is certainty to be able to get into the program, knowing when that's going to begin. So it is respectfully a different time each year.
I'm not sure. I think they're interrelated. It's part of the whole pilot. They're related. They work together, both the capacity issuance and the completion, because one is dependent on the other. And this, to me, I see this issue as about the ability of certain developers to gobble up capacity and scoop it up as quickly as possible, even maybe before the projects are fully ripe. So that's just my perception, my opinion. I don't know for certain that that's true, but it's a gut feeling that I have. And this is a pilot, so we're learning as we go. It's not like this is well plowed ground. And so we need to have some latitude. And I can't reconcile in my mind, on one hand, endless delays, but we're going to hold another party in this whole process to hard and fast tariff dates. I don't get the inconsistency, the incongruency there from CCSA, to be honest with you. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Linton?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my questions are a bit more basic. Can the parties tell me what year are we in now of the program, this 7-year program? Which year are we all in agreement that we're in 1 year as opposed to a different year?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, I just muted my microphone. I think where we are is once these tariffs are approved, year 4 would begin. And then what CCSA is talking about is when do years 5, 6, and 7 begin. I think the universal understanding is we're moving into year 4 at this point.
Okay.
And staff agrees with that. Just
all right. So if we're in year 4 now, and we're going by a calendar year, year 5.
Oh, excuse me, Your Honor. Year 4 will begin in January of next year.
January.
That was what Mr. Bugelman said.
Okay, so that's when the tariffs are effective on January 1st. I believe that's the date I saw in one of these filings. Is that true for all of the companies?
Yes, Your Honor.
Yes.
Okay. So I don't understand. There's maybe it's me, but is there some issue about the year being longer than 365 days? Are we seeing ourselves as year 4, even though we're in the January or February of next year, when we started in January of this year? Now, I understand the issue of making capacity available with the next year starting. What I don't understand is what's prohibiting the year from actually starting on its own. Is there somebody that's saying no, the year can't start, even though it's by calendar purposes it has?
Mr. Linton, it's Drew McCall on behalf of staff. I think Mr. Herson made some valid points with that. Considering this is a pilot and it's still a fluid situation, new regulations may arise. So the utilities didn't want to have set dates in case something arose, such as expanding the program from 3 to 7 years. So having a set hardline date may, reduce any sort of flexibility to update regulations or tariffs to comply with any changes. If we set the date again exactly January 1st, 2022, year 5 starts, yet the legislature passes something where capacity, let's just say, increases in every year, we'd have to have another filing and finalize tariffs and everything else before that year started again. So I think that's the main issue on why the utilities and staff doesn't want to set a hardline date. This is a fluid pilot.
So then and I understand the fluidity of a pilot like this. So the answer then has been to effectively extend beyond what we'll traditionally know as a 12-month year to make it some larger amount of time. So what happens with the capacity that was supposed to be made available in the new year? Is that available for 12 months, or what we would consider to be a year, or is it some other period of time?
He can answer that better, but there's a wait list, and once the capacity opens up, the first applicant on that wait list would move forward to constructing their project.
Okay. So, this, as we're moving through the years, I guess they going from a 12 months or 14 or whatever period of time might have some rationale to it. What happens at the end of the pilot? Are we looking at a truncated 6-month year or something, or because there may not be points along the way, but 7 years is going to be 7 years. So what happens at the end? Are we talking about now extending beyond 7 years in order to get the full, what we'll call 7 years in, or are we just going to have a shortened 7th year? Or I should say not 7th year, but last year of the pilot.
I can tell you on behalf of, I'm sorry, Drew, if you want to.
You go ahead.
I was going to say on behalf of CCSA, that's one of our concerns. So if you look at the commission's regulations on the program, it specifically says this is a 7-year program. But what we've seen is years that are longer than a year. And, if we continue on this track, we're going to end up basically over that 7-year window. The commission could change its regulations, but that's what's in COMAR today. So that was the basis for us trying to kind of catch up with, beginning year 5 very soon after year 4. It was to try to get everything to fit within that 7-year window, Your Honor.
If I could respond to that, Commissioner Linton. I don't know if there's a set deadline date. Obviously, we don't want to truncate any years. Obviously, the goal isn't to have these years last longer than 12 months. It's just the recent history obviously points to changes that may occur. So again, we just wanted the initial flexibility, and with this proposal, year 4 and 5 would essentially open up at the same time. So I think Commissioner O'Donnell's concerns about kind of gobbling up capacity may be a valid point as well. So we're concerned about those 2 years essentially opening up on top of each other as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's all I had. Thanks, everybody, for answering the question.
Commissioner Richard.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This would be a question for staff. Maybe Mr. McCall, or you can pass it to someone else. But in that we are asking these companies to make a significant investment and planning to help us meet this goal, to meet these program objectives. If not in a form, an administrative meeting, when would we make this change? I mean, how would we go about entertaining a proposal and try to act expeditiously on it? Would it be another AM after the work group meets, or would we have to wait for rulemaking?
That may be a legal process question. I think this would be the time if the commission wanted to set dates to do so in the tariff. This issue was raised in the working group. I know the utilities made all the working group members aware of the dates they were going to start year 4. It was mostly in January, I believe. And even said they were going to start in December until the tariff was pushed back to have all of them aligned. This issue was brought up. We were well aware of CCSA's objection to not having a firm start date. But as to your question of the process of it, I think this current admin is a reasonable time to change it. Like I said, because we are approving the tariffs now. I don't know that obviously delaying it, I don't think would appease the community solar folks as well.
Okay, and so Smith has been aware of this issue, and has raised concern, obviously, in the fact sheet about this proposal. Have staff considered other alternatives to try to address the concern about catching up and providing the clarity to the developers on how we might address this issue?
Yeah, in regards to catching up, again, I think we have concerns about kind of, I'm not sure we need to catch up because there were delays for obvious reasons, again, as Mr. Herson laid out, because of various legislative changes and things of that nature. So I don't know that we need to catch up per se. And again, we want to give folks clarity. Again, issues arose that were not foreseen. So, and as we heard from the utilities, they want to do these at a set, 12 months at a time and not push them back, outside forces cause them to push it back. So, and again, it's a pilot. Obviously, I want to give folks clarity, but it is a pilot. Like I said, things have been arising. So it's hard for us to say, January 1, a new year starts. And then if the legislature passes something and we need to have new regulations, more regulations or tariff changes, those things take time to approve before the year can start.
Okay, just so I'm hearing correctly, so staff doesn't think that doesn't agree that there's a problem or a problem that needs to be addressed. Because the concern I have is I'm hearing from the developers that they have to make a lot of planning decisions and put at risk a lot of money to make these things work. So are you just dismissing the concern, or what is the vision? Is there an alternative way to address the concern of the developers, the solar industry, that staff has been contemplating, or is it just not a problem at all from the staff size?
Well, I don't know if there's another way to address their concern other than setting a firm date for the start years, considering that specific issue they brought up. No, I understand what they're saying, but again, this is a pilot. We're still working through kinks, for lack of a better word, and there are wait lists. So if they applied for year 3, they know if they're first in queue for year 4 capacity, so they could plan based on that. Is my understanding. So if hey, we didn't make year 4, but we're number 1 for year 5, then you can make plans to adjust to that. So I hear their concerns, but yeah, again, it is a pilot. This isn't a full-blown program yet where we can, where everything's flowing smoothly.
Okay, and then last, just, I heard Ms. Garofalo say that this isn't necessarily a workload issue for staff. And then I also, heard that the utilities, they don't appear to have a strong opposition to this for workload reasons. I don't want to put words in their mouth, but that's what I think I heard, that they could be okay with commission action. Does that change staff's view on this at all? The buck sheet represents that there was concern about impacts on utilities. So if the utilities don't have that same concern, does that, relax concern of staff?
Your Honor, just to clarify what I said, we actually do have a concern with this specific date that was thrown out, January 17th, from a workload standpoint. And the way it was portrayed by CCSA is incorrect. We can't necessarily start way in advance.
If I could respond to staff, Your Honor.
I'd be interested in a response. Thank you.
Okay, so I think it's important to understand our proposal is really 2 separate issues. There's the idea of trying to catch up kind of for lost time, the fact that we're a year behind. But there's also the separate issue of just establishing fixed dates. We know, when year 5, 6, and 7 will occur. So to the extent there is concern about workload, again, we have reason to believe that maybe it's really not as problematic as it's been suggested today. But if there's concern about that, we could start the 5, 6, and 7 years at a different date than what we proposed. One potential way to do it is, if you look at Table 2 in our filing, you see that year 1 actually started in June of 2017. So you could start 5, 6, and 7. You can start year 5 in June of 2021, kind of move from there. There would be, we think, a benefit to the program and developers to having fixed dates, even if they aren't tied to a date that's immediately, after this admin. So I just wanted to make sure that that's clear, that these are two discrete issues and you can address them and, I think separately or just one instead of both.
Okay, well, thank you, Mr. Williams. In any case, Mr. Chairman, I would be in favor of trying to accommodate these developers. I mean, we depend on them to make these big investments in our state for this important state policy. So to the extent that there is not clarity in our system and they need to be able to have this planning ability. And while I understand this, it's a pilot with companies putting major investments and trying to help us achieve a legislative mandate. So I would be in favor of the language, although Mr. Bugelman, you cut through into a little bit of confusion for me what those dates would be. So if we were not, and again, obviously this depends on what the my colleagues want to do. If we were to try to come up with dates, would there be a date other than January 19th? Is that what you're suggesting?
I didn't mean to muddy the water, Your Honor. Our proposal is to do it based off of what was supposed to be the year one start date, which is January 18th of each year. I just wanted to make clear to the group that, these are two issues we're trying to address. So if there is an inclination that, maybe that's too soon, we're combining years 4 and 5, that potentially you could break them out and set later dates. I threw June out as maybe a time to do it because that's when year one began under the original program. Just logistically, that's from a practical standpoint, that's when utilities began accepting applications. But I think it's a question for the commission.
Okay. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so that would be my. I guess I would indicate that I'd be supportive of the language that is in the mail log letter that CCSA submitted for this hearing today. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you. I think what I'm hearing from Mr. Bugelman's and from the utility companies, at least, is that there does appear to be agreement, but that maybe some things need to be worked out, particularly with the last sentence about the capacity rolling in year 4 to year 5. Maybe there's something that can be worked out, because I believe that what happens is that if there's extra capacity, that's dealt with in the final year. And so maybe, we can figure something out with respect to how to deal with extra capacity if it exists. My suggestion, being that there appears to be general agreement, taking Mr. Bugelman's up on his offer and saying, we don't have to, we can approve the utilities tariffs today, but that doesn't stop future dates being set for years 6 and 7. And it sounds like the utilities are amenable to that. And I think it would be best if this is dealt with through the working group because of all the various issues. And to me, it seems like we can compromise on this one and approve the language for this year, but then direct the working group to go back and revise it for future years, given that there is some, I believe, merit to having this worked out in the working group. So I think that may not, help as much as Mr. Bugelman's and his clients would like, but it definitely helps them. And at the same time, it gives staff and utilities time to be addressing issues they may have. So I wonder if Mr. Bugelman's and the utilities and staff would comment briefly on that concept.
Sure, I think that's a reasonable proposal. The one thing that from CCSA's perspective that I think would be important would be a deadline by which the work group needs to report back on the dates that are arrived at. Because again, we're talking about trying to come up with dates that are known in advance. So if there's no fixed time that we need to take this up again, it could go on for too long and not really serve its purpose, at least for the next year. So I think CCSA would be amenable to that as long as there's a a deadline and the immediate term by which we could pick this back up.
Fair enough. Thank you, Mr. Bugelman.
Sure.
Commissioner McCall on behalf of staff. Yeah, we'd be happy to work with all parties involved. I guess as Mr. Bugelman's pointed out, there's really the two issues, the kind of catching up issue of having year 4 and 5 essentially start at the same time, and then the set dates for years 5, 6, and 7 going forward. So yeah, if the commission wished to approve the tariffs as filed now, and then work on setting start dates for years 5, 6, and 7, staff would be happy to work with all parties to do so.
Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my hope would be if we do, and I support sending this issue back to the work group. I think it's appropriate for them to do that instead of negotiating dates and stuff here. That doesn't make any sense to me. So what I would suggest, though, is that the parties give real consideration, because I heard conflicting testimonies from almost all parties here today. I heard staff say never talked about in the work group. I heard staff say talked about in the work group. I heard staff's. I heard the developers say, told by Mr. So-and-so from staff, the tariffs would be the appropriate place to put this. And then I hear staff saying today the tariffs are not the appropriate place to put it. So, and I don't point that out to be flip. I point that out to say, please give this serious consideration and everybody be on the same page on this when it comes back, so we can make a real decision, kind of not ferret it out on the fly here. We're busy as all you are, and we got work to continue here yet today in the rulemaking, so we got to get going. But Mr. Chairman, I support going back to the working group for this issue.
Thank you, Commissioner. We do have a rulemaking starting at 11 a.m. this morning. I agree with your thoughts. I agree with Commissioner Herman's, I would say, compromised position. Mr. Bugelman wants a deadline. I suspect we don't need to impose one. Staff recognizes that this is a concern. We need to provide some level of certainty to the community solar developers in our state, recognizing that the developers have oftentimes missed deadlines, some of them, and many of them perhaps outside of their control due to weather or permits. But this, at the end of the day, this is a pilot, and we want it to be successful. This could also be a perennial issue that I'd rather not see again in years 5, 6, and 7. So I'm going to propose that we accept the tariffs today, have this issue readdressed in the work group, because I did hear, as Commissioner O'Donnell, a number of inconsistencies amongst a number of the parties today. And the utilities seem to be very cooperative and willing to play ball both with the developers and with staff. Mr. Seegers, if you could tell me your concern with the tariff really quickly. I'm looking at your December 4th submission. It was the 3rd revised submission. What are we looking at?
I will be very brief, Your Honor. It is an extremely minor wordsmithing edit on second revised page number 23.3, which is the 6th page of the December 4 filing.
Okay.
On section 4, because we have added the new category on 50 kW or less, the or after open should be moved one line down. And that is a change that we can take care of in our compliance filing. Just wanted to note it for the commission and all the parties, Your Honor.
Okay, that is less than a typo, but I see that. So it's 4A and B, and then the or moves one line down. Is that correct?
That's correct, Your Honor. And the same changes would be made for the Delmarva Power tariffs as well.
Okay, do you have the page number for the Delmarva tariff?
I can get it for you in just a moment.
I'd just like to get this on the record. So just to be clear, the PEPCO tariff is second revised page number 23.3.
And the Delmarva Power tariff is second revised leaf number 92C as in Charlie.
Thank you. I suspect my colleagues don't have any concerns with that tariff change. With that, I'm prepared to propose a motion.
Sure. Can I just so I understand what the compromise position is? So would this mean that the work group would meet, hopefully come up with a compromise position or a new proposal? Then would they come back to the commission at an AM for a revision to the tariff? Is that how that would play out? I just want to find out how we get to at least as quick a decision as we can on this, so that it doesn't linger too long.
That would be the plan for the next following tranche. So,
Mr. Chairman, I just want to clarify my position. I don't want to limit it to a tariff revision. There may be other solutions that are available once the work group gets to meet. I'm not voting to change the tariffs at a future date right now. I'm saying send it back to the work group for vetting. That's my position.
Yeah, I wasn't talking about positions. I was just trying to get a clarification of how this would come back to the commission. So again, it doesn't just end up in limbo and in the work group process. That's all. So
sure. My point is no. I'm not agreeing to change the tariff in the future, depending on some negotiation in the work group. There may be other solutions.
Well, I would certainly want to see the tariff before I voted on it. But again, yeah, I think we're agreeing. All I was asking is for a clarification when CCSA could come back and we would consider any changes. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
yes, and the parties could come back after the work group has addressed this issue between the CCSA, the staff, and the developers. So that timeline is up to the work group. Well, you've heard and staff has heard that this is an important issue, so it's not to linger, notwithstanding the fact that we're not prescribing a deadline today. What we are doing is voting on the tariff revisions that are now before us. And I will move that we, with respect to items number 6 and 7, accept the tariff revisions for filing with an effective date of January 1st, 2021. And with respect to item number 8, accept the tariff revisions for filing as modified at this administrative meeting with an effective date of January 1st, 2021. The vote begins with Commissioner Herman.
Aye.
Commissioner Linton. Was that an aye, Commissioner, or thumbs up?
Aye.
There we go. Thank you.
Aye.
I missed.
Okay, there it is. Aye.
That was 2 ayes. Commissioner O'Donnell.
Aye.
And Commissioner Richard.
Do I get 2 ayes too?
I also vote aye. The motion is approved for items 6, 7, and 8. The commission will reconvene at 11:20 a.m. this morning in rulemaking number 70. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.